Hey there, I'm Velez, and I'm going to be talking about the indie game development scene here in the Philippines. And the way I'm going to go going about that is I'm going to go through some indie games that we've made or are making, and then I'm going to go into the current state and some organizations that could either help you as a scout or help you as a developer. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want to talk about is the indie games that we like to make. And if I try to fit all of the games that we are currently making and all the games that we've made in 15 minutes and within this short presentation, it's going to be, just going to be saying their names and then, maybe that's it. So to give you an answer of what kind of games we like to make, it's basically anything. We don't have rules and we don't try to limit ourselves into a certain genre. And that's something that's very helpful in the community, and it's something also that we don't try to police. It's not like we have a central system that tells indie games like, hey, you should make these kinds of games because they're the kind of games that sell and stuff like that. No, we as a community like it when somebody in the community explores and pushes the bar forward. And and one of the reasons behind that is that in the Philippines we have a lot of varying cultures that are put in a very compact space. And if you try to generalize it, then you're just going to fail. Yeah, because of that, we make games that are varying in design. It's a varying mindsets, varying targets, and yeah, we really like to explore and kind of push the bar forward. How far can we go, making games that are socially significant, technologically innovating, and all around very unique games. And I'm trying to limit myself here in the presentation because I wanted to give you like a better picture in a sense. But in the Philippines, we make games for any platform. I'm going to be talking about digital here, but we do like creating card games, board games, tabletop RPGs, games that you play with your community. And with that, I'm going to go to our first one, to the Bottle Extreme, developed by Mostly Games. And I'm pretty sure that everyone in this room already knows about the Bottle Extreme. And, it's widely successful. And it kind of developed its own culture in a sense. We now look into Ruin Art, which is a game that is developed by Macam Games. And it's currently being published by Squeaky Wheel. And that's the thing. Squeaky Wheel is a local publisher. And aside from, all of that going on, Ruin Arc has a very unique concept to it where you are the bad guy and you are trying to mess up the lives of the villagers, which is an opposite of a city building game. Shots Fired is developed by Pricey and is published by Another Indie. Another Indie is an international publisher, and just goes to show that these games are easily picked up and already being published, both locally and internationally. 125 is a self-published game by Plus Points, and the what I do want to talk about is that it is a puzzle game on mobile, which there are a number of them, but this one in particular is very polished from its transitions to the effects that you see on the screen. Everything has been created with a level of professionalism from a group of friends that work on games on the side. Next is Couch Potato, which is developed by Dan Liamco. And yeah, as much as Dan Liamco worked on the game, he has a very small team to work with. By a small team and a short amount of time is already saying a lot, because this is the level of games that we are kind of seeing in game jams in the first place. So when it comes to quality and given the short amount of time that we are able to like chuck it out, this is very impressive. Next, I want to talk about is Lomage Academy. It is developed by Verenius, and I will disclose that Verenius is a solo developer. And additionally, Verenius is not in the game industry, or was not. Well, he is now. Verenius has a different profession, and he kind of started to get into game development by picking up RPG Maker and then creating this game from there. And that's something that's very impressive because that goes to show that even without the experience, Filipinos are able to take their creative juices and kind of make the games that they want to make by themselves. And I'm gonna go back into that a little bit later, so just hang on. Yellow Boat Reimagined is impressive. It's created by a bunch of students. The team is called Salt Vault, and I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. So there's a lot to go on here. It's created by students. It's socially significant because it is part of the Yellow Boat of Hope Foundation. And lastly, it's a VR game. So it goes to show, and I'm going to go into this a little bit later as well, is that the younger parts of the community are already being introduced into these technologies while they're still in college, which is something that we didn't have years ago. And next, I want to get into the Red Adventures of Butter. And what I want to talk about here is the art style and the very unique design choices for characters. The game looks great, but there are certain design choices that I want to point out here about the characters, which is the guy's face is turned sideways. it still looks amazing. And I'm pretty sure that the developers will be able to share their design choices with you. They'll openly give you that answer. Bayani Fighting Game is it's a beautiful fighting game, and it's been developed by Bernita Games. It basically takes in our Filipino national heroes and then reimagine them into a fighting game. Usually, when we have events that are on site, their showcase is very impressive. Next up is Project Sandata. This is developed by the studio Secret Six, and it is a monster. Studio Secret Six is a game development company that works together with other AAA game development companies. So they're able to take on the knowledge and the practices, the experience that they get with working with those companies and putting them into their own game. And then I just want to say this indie game is marvelous. Everything is stunning. And with that, since now you have a kind of very broad understanding of what kind of games we make or we are making, it's easy to say that we've come a long way from what we were 10 years ago. And how much this community or culture has spread over different age groups is very impressive. If you look at Global Game Jam, there are more and more sites being added on a yearly basis. Gamers are introduced to games at an earlier age. Games were introduced into the community earlier on because it was more accessible. The earlier that we were introduced into games, the earlier that we fell in love with them. The earlier that we fell in love with it was easier for our parents to see that we were in love with it. But back then, and I'm going to go into a little bit of culture here in the Philippines, is that we tend to follow what our parents say, and I'm putting it a lot nicer than that. Parents try to control our lives, basically. And what happened with the community there is that since game studios are popping up in the Philippines and the industry is booming, it has become a viable source of income. It has been a viable profession. And with that, we tend to have a lot of people coming in that are very passionate about the industry and want to make their own games. That's something that's awesome to watch. As you see the community getting larger and larger on a yearly basis, and we see so much talent coming in unhindered by cultural norms. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit because in the Philippines, gamers are not usually ostracized for being gamers. Lots of people play games because their parents play games. And as much as every person has a different experience, they do have a home within the community. And that's something that they can lean on and find support through. Aside from that, the community goes out and shares knowledge and do public talks and stuff like that. And that causes the barrier of entry to get lower. And not only that, I mean, Unity and Unreal are free game engines that you can pick up and try and learn about with their online tutorials. That's where all these game developers are coming from. It's the accessibility. Game jams and indie Fiesta get a lot of participants on a yearly basis. If you want to prove the viability of game development here in the Philippines, we already have a Ubisoft office. To add to that, companies all around the Philippines are making the effort to produce local titles, and these will span from size of small teams working on them into the larger companies. And companies like the studio Secret Six, Altitude are work for hire in their model, but they also make original content. Who Apps is a game company that is dedicated to making indie games, and Squeaky Wheel is already taking on publishing. These companies are making the community a lot better than what it used to be, let's say 10, 15 years ago. And they really show what Filipino game developers are like. And what is a Filipino game developer? This community has members from all walks of life, different parts of the country, whose culture varies from island to island. It has members with the LGBTQ plus community, and there is no bias against them. We welcome them as part of, I'm not going to say family. It's a sharing, non-exclusive community. All you have to do is message someone. Most likely, if that person knows someone else, they'll just connect you to someone else in the community, and they'll be able to help you, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction of where you want to go. Right, I'm Velez, and I'm from Indie Fiesta, and with Gwen and Francis, what we do is that we display locally made indie games as a showcase on a yearly basis. And aside from that, it comes with the territory of playing those games and then giving them advice on how to proceed with them. We hope to open doors to publishers with these game developers. Game On is an event that awards local creations to keep pushing games forward and have them more impressive on a yearly basis. All right, so a little bit running out of time here. So take the PH and GDAP. They support the game industry here in the Philippines, which also supports the independent games with their numerous talks and community building activities. And then there's Unpub PH, which is an organization that supports game designers. They are mostly working on card games, board games, and tabletop RPGs, but they're also part of the community, so we help each other out. All right, so feel free to email me anytime, be it if you're looking for certain games that we will publish, or if you want any help with the game that you're making yourself. And with that, thank you.